Hello and welcome to the Flipping and Wholesaling Houses in New York show. I'm Michael Pinter. I teach you how to start flipping or wholesaling houses in New York, or if you're already doing it, how to grow your business. We're talking today about what is clean title. So clean title means a lot of different things in a lot of different places. If you stay to the end, I'm going to talk to you about some things that are sort of different in New York when it comes to this than in other parts of the country. So let me talk. In general, when a contract is going on between a buyer and a seller, right, and in 49 states, the contract process takes place, the transaction takes place between a buyer and a seller. In New York, it doesn't. It takes place between a seller's attorney who generates the contract and the buyer's attorney. But in general, what the seller has to convey is clean title. Now, that is a very general term. What it usually means, and what's required in the state of New York, but may or may not be required in other states, is that all the liens are cleared and that the seller can convey title, which means the ownership of the property, to a buyer in a clean way so that the buyer won't have problems with their ownership. Now, what happens on every transaction, at least if you're smart, is that you have title insurance. And that it means that a company is going to ensure that you are going to own this property. Basically, if you think about what that means, it means that a Native American can't show up 10 years after you buy a house and say, this is my grandfather's house, get out. There's a company that's ensuring that title was conveyed. Now, clean title usually means the property is free of liens and free of mortgages, so that the buyer, when they get the property, does not have any obligations from the seller. Now, the way a lot of transactions take place in other states, and I know Florida is one of them, a lot of other states, is you can buy a property subject to certain liens. That means with those liens in place. So in New York, I have been very spoiled by the fact that that never happens. Now, let's explain why. What I just told you that takes place is that in most states, a real estate transaction will take place between a buyer and a seller. So if I'm a buyer and I want to buy your property for $500,000, and you're a seller, you want to sell it to me $500,000, I can draw up a contract. I can I can be in contract with you once we sign that document. In New York, once a seller agrees with a buyer on a price, then the seller's attorney has to generate a contract, send it to the buyer's attorney. Now, in other states, what takes place after the buyer and seller agree is that a title company really runs a transaction. Title company will run title, will actually disperse funds, will deal with all these liens, will make sure clean title is conveyed, and the title company runs a transaction. That's why you might see when you listen on the internet to other gurus that you need an investor-friendly title company. In New York, it's dramatically different, right? The transaction is not run by the title company. The transaction is run by an attorney, okay? Usually the seller's attorney runs it, but if there is a bank, if there's financing, then the bank's attorney is going to run the transaction. So it's common, even on a wholesale deal with me, that there'll be 4 attorneys at a closing. There'll be seller's attorney, my attorney, the buyer's attorney, my end buyer's attorney, and then if he's getting hard money, the lender's attorney. And this concept of clean title basically means there aren't any issues. So some things that might cause title not to be clean are if the property was owned by someone who's deceased and the property hasn't been probated yet. So when somebody dies, the process of probate is taking assets from the deceased and putting them into the heirs. Sometimes there's a will and there's an executor, or if it's a woman, an executrix of the will. If there's no will, someone will be appointed as an administrator. And basically, there is a legal process to move that asset from the deceased into whoever is going to be inheriting that property. So sometimes you'll get it, you'll get a property, and the guy you're talking to is John Smith, and you look at the title, and it's owned by Frank Smith, and you're like, who's that? And he's like, well, it's my father who left me the house. Well, now that title's not clean. There has to be something to clean up. Now, one of the best things about New York that I've spoken about a lot on this channel is that when you're in contract in New York, there's no way out. The seller can't change his mind, right? What I described, a very easy process to get into contract in 49 states, and it's a very difficult process in New York to get into contract, but there's no way to get out of contract. So sometimes what other investors will do is as soon as a seller agrees to them and signs a contract, they will then go, and it depends on the state and depends on the county, they will go record something in the county. They might record the contract, they might record a memorandum of contract, an affidavit of contract, something to cloud title in case the seller changes his mind and wants to sell the property to somebody else. In New York, it's completely unnecessary. But what they do is that clouds title. Now, all that means is that if the guy decides to sell it to somebody else and that other person goes and runs title, they're going to see this thing and they're going to say, well, title isn't clean. Now, in truth is, it doesn't really protect you that much. It just means that one day you may get a call saying, hey, this guy's trying to sell the house and you may say, well, I want $5,000 or something like that. In New York, it's a much better situation because once you're in contract as a buyer in New York, if the seller changes his mind, you can do two things. First of all, you can put a list pendants on the house, which means just like a mortgage foreclosure, he's never going to sell it to anybody else ever. I mean, that's not clouding title. That is shutting title down, number one. Number two is you can sue the seller for specific performance, which means you can sue him for the entire purchase price. So if the guy is selling your house for $500,000 and changes his mind, you could sue him for $500,000. Now you may say, how does the seller even know that? The answer is he's represented by an attorney who's going to tell him that. So a few months ago, a seller called me and said, I changed my mind, I want more money. I said, I didn't get angry. I said, just speak to your attorney. He called me back an hour later. He said, I spoke to my attorney. When do you want to close? There's no way out of contract when you're a seller in New York and the buyer wants to perform. The buyer doesn't want to perform. There's other issues, but it's incredibly empowering to know that once you're in contract in New York, no one else is ever going to buy that property. It's yours. So in New York, when we talk about clean title, so one of the things that happens in New York, and I've spoken about this on the channel also, is that I'm not going to say anything's impossible, but it is close to impossible to do a subject to deal. So let me explain what a subject to deal is. And this happens in 49 states. Subject to deal is you have a guy who wants to sell a house and he's got a mortgage on it. You want to buy the house and keep that mortgage in place. He's selling it to you subject to the first mortgage. I'm not going to get into the details of why it might be a good idea to do this. Okay, it definitely works. I know people that do it all the time and have made millions of dollars on it. But if you have an investor-friendly title company that's used to that, and I think in all 49 states there are title companies that will do it, it's a good method, right? It can make sense. In New York, I think it's as close to impossible as there is. Now, why do I say that? Because there are two issues. First of all, there's a seller's attorney. Now, understand, the seller's attorney is telling his client that he can sell a property and keep a mortgage that's staying on the seller's credit and trusting the buyer to deal with it. If that buyer would, let's say, make a late payment, I think that attorney might be subject to malpractice lawsuit because he advised his client to do it. So I don't think any seller's attorney is going to allow that. But let's assume there's no seller's attorney, right? There are deals that close without a seller's attorney. The title company in New York are not running the transaction. Their job is really to do two things, and that's it. Make sure all the liens are paid off, and make sure all the taxes are paid off and adjusted. I don't know of any title company in New York that's going to allow a deal to close with a mortgage that's not officially assumable to stay in place. I just don't think so. I think it's basically their job. Now, is it possible that there is a title company that exists like that? It's possible. But to get past the attorney issue and then get past the title issue, I think it's almost impossible in New York to do a subject to deal. So my thoughts are that clean title in New York is different. So here's one of the things that happened. When I used to buy it for the first 4 years I was in this business, I was buying properties at auction. I never once ran title on an auction property, and I never have. Because in New York, whenever you buy something at an auction, or really when you buy anything, you're always getting clean title, which means free of liens, nothing. But in other places, like in Florida, where people buy at auction, they have to run title because you buy a property there, it's not free of liens. It's subject to whatever liens are on there. So if the seller had a tax lien of $52,000, you may get stuck with that on your property when you try and sell it. So it's a beautiful thing about New York, right? And I know there's a lot of challenges in New York, but one of the amazing things in New York is you always get clean title, always, no matter how you buy a property. So unless you contractually agree to, let's say, leave some issue on title. So another thing that could cloud title is municipal issues, housing and building issues. There could be open violations or open permits. So in most cases, you can claim that that is not clean title. I'm buying a property from you, but it's got an open violation or an open permit. Therefore, it's not clean title. And you need to clean that up unless it's stipulated in the contract that you're taking it subject to whatever liens or permits are there. So that's sort of how clean title works. Title is really important. You never, ever buy a property without getting title insurance, ever, right? Because if there's some kind of fraud or something, the title company is on the hook. Now, it's not easy to make a title claim. I've been involved in several title claims. It's not easy to collect. It's a big pain in the ass. But at least you know somebody's trying to get your money back if you get screwed on a deal. So that's clean title. Clean title means that the seller is conveying ownership of this property without any problems, right? It means different things in different states. It means different things in different situations. But clean title means you're getting the property clean. You're not going to have any issues that come from the seller. That's what it means. I hope this was helpful. If you're interested in different ways I can help you, go to howtoflipnewyork.com. If you're interested in my course that teaches how to do this, go to howtoflipnewyorkcourse.com. If you're interested in coaching, go to coaching.howtoflipnewyork.com. howtoflipnewyork.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're watching on any channel, please click the thumbs up. The thumbs up and the likes have really helped me. A lot more people have been viewing my videos lately because of the likes that you've been giving me, so I really appreciate it. And please keep the comments coming. I go live 5 times a week. Sometimes I don't have a clue as to what I'm going to talk about, so the comments help me. There are no bad comments. Any comment will be answered. I reply to all the comments. If it's a simple answer, I'll just reply with an answer. If it's a topic that maybe I've covered in depth, I will send you a link to the videos on it, video or videos on it. I just did that recently. And if it's, thank you for all the likes, John. And if it's a topic that I haven't covered in a while, or a topic I've never covered, then I will do a video on it. So I really appreciate everyone watching. Thank you very, very much.